Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
I love reading thrillers. Love it. It's like the biggest release. And I finished a new one by one of the top thriller writers in the world, Harlan Coben. He not only writes all these incredible books, but they end up in movies, on TV, they're streamed, they're everywhere. And we've become very attached to some of his characters. And in his brand new book called The Match, we re-meet Wilde. Do you remember that, guys? That's the very attractive man who apparently, as a little kid, 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there, was abandoned by his parents in the Ramapo Mountains in New Jersey. And when he's found, the child doesn't really know anything much about his past, or certainly anything about his parents. But he does something which millions of Americans do. He goes on one of those sites that tell you about your DNA, and a match on this ancestry database changes his life. And it may be possible, he finds, to be able now at this stage to track down his father, maybe his descendants, his cousins, his parents. And of course, we end up with everything you can imagine: conspiracy, fear. It's a wonderful, fast read book. So you have so many. Where did this latest come from? Have you ever done the DNA thing?
I have done the DNA test, both only for research purposes for this book. But yeah, the whole idea was, as you say, so imagine if you find this kid in the woods. He swears he's always lived in the woods. He's 5 or 6 years old, doesn't remember parents, broke into cabins to feed himself, and some 35 years later, he still doesn't know how he ended up in the woods. And right on page 1, after taking a DNA test, the matches, he's standing across the street from his biological father. So we're getting right into the tale. This is the match is his origin story, right? If it was a Batman, this is where we learn Batman's parents were murdered. Right. This is sort of how Wilde became Wilde. So the match is the origin story, if you will.
Right. And he's so well adjusted, Harlan. That's the, part. Dump a kid in the woods and pick him up later. They're usually not like this character who, despite everything, is pretty solid inside.
Well, Wilde has a lot of trouble connecting to people. He lives, for the most part, in this eco capsule, which is a really cool thing in the woods. He doesn't really connect well with people. And as the book goes on, he really does start to shed some of those inhibitions and starts to really form ties with those around him. But the other things I wanted to do, Joan, and I think you probably picked up on it, was it takes place very much in the modern day. So I was dealing with some of the darker side of reality TV, of online trolling, online bullying.
Bachelor shows, dating shows.
Yes, exactly. I thought it would be interesting for him to go through those worlds. Here's this sort of guy living in the woods going through these worlds to be able to find the answer of who he is and how he ended up abandoned in those woods.
Right, and to track the other side of him with sort of a family he's adopted over the years. But, you too are an amazing character. You're still in college when you say, I'm going to be a writer. Now, that's like me when I was a kid saying, I'm going to be an actor. The reality is so far from putting the statement out there. But a couple of years after you got out, you actually were a writer, quote unquote, and did get published. Do you remember, when you think back, how that really happened?
I remember everything. I mean, I've had an interesting career it was not overnight success. My first New York Times bestseller was my 10th novel, Tell No One. It was the first time I hit the bestseller list. It was my 10th novel. So it was a interesting process. But, my goals were always just to look a little bit ahead. Oh, I just want to have a novel published. Oh, wouldn't it be cool to have 2 novels published to show it wasn't a fluke? Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could just kind of scratch out a living? Oh, wouldn't it be great if one day I hit a bestseller list? Oh, wouldn't it be great if one day it hit number 1? All those sort of things were more of a gradual process. Today, I don't want to be one of these whining about people of today, but everybody thinks that their first book should be a huge bestseller.
Instant. Yeah, but I'm curious.
It's not different. Yeah.
If you were an actor, we might have met you in the wine business or as a waiter or something. So what did you do during those years from graduation to publishing a real book? And as you point out, it was years before you had a bestseller.
Well, for 8 years, I was in the travel business, a family business in travel. I was also smart enough to marry a pediatrician. My wife is a doctor. And so when I left that business after 8 years, and we sat down and we agreed, let's give it a try. Let's give this writing thing a try. I also was more the stay-at-home parent. I know a lot of people will hear, the dad was the stay-at-home parent, but not really, or, they share responsibilities, but it always seems to fall on the woman. I would say my wife and I were about as evenly divided doing the household chores and the children's stuff as you could be. I was the one who was mostly at home, did most of the driving. She likes to cook. So it was sort of a good mix that way.
It worked. Well. And then after you hit a bestseller and had that pressure, which a lot of writer friends have, you got to duplicate this. Did your life change a lot, or did you still maintain the same regimen?
Well, there's no question that success messes with your head. But again, I was 39 years old and already when my 4th kid was born the first day I hit the bestseller list. So it wasn't like I could start partying with Leo, So I feel like
had a lot.
When I read these actors, when I meet or read about these actors or rock stars who all of a sudden gain fame in their 20s and don't have those sort of guardrails, it surprises me they even survive. Nonetheless, don't do even dumber things than what we read about. So my life was pretty much the same. And, was there pressure? There's actually, in some ways, there was less pressure. The real pressure, of course, is trying to hope your next book even gets published, or that you can maybe scratch out a living. The pressure today and all the pressure has always for me been self-induced. You're a reader. You're going in a bookstore. You're going to buy the match. I take great responsibility. That's a real honor. There's thousands of books you could choose from, and I don't want to disappoint the reader. I want the match to be your favorite read of mine. I want that ending of the match to not only surprise you, but really kind of move you and wreck you a little bit. And if I'm not doing that, I'm disappointed in myself. So I'm always trying my best to do the best work that I can each time out.
Right. And the question that I get from listeners all the time is, all right, I'm writing a book, or I've written a book, whether it's I'm a lawyer and want to share my story, or it's a murder or a cookbook. How do you do this? So here you were, married and probably had a kid before the first book came out. How did you get yourself published? You weren't connected. You were in an unrelated business.
Well, my first 2 books actually came out before I had any of the kids, but they were with a very small press. I actually just sent it in and asked for an opinion, and they ended up publishing it. But it was an advance of, I think, $2,000. It was a beautiful hardcover edition, but it was not anywhere but libraries and a few bookstores.
Was it a thriller?
So then, it was a thriller. It was called Play Dead, and then Miracle Cure. Those were my first 2 books. And then I moved into the Myron Bolitar series, which was a paperback original series, but with a major publishing house, Bantam Doubleday Dell, and slowly moved up the ladder from that.
Right. That was your basketball player or former basketball player
Yes,
who's now an
yes,
agent.
yes. That's Myron. Yes.
And then that was it. Then you started.
Then it started, and it was growing slowly. I was doing just fine, and then I wrote a book called Tell No One. In 2000, came out in 2001, and that book changed my life overnight. That was the first New York Times bestseller, and all of a sudden my career went from 0 to 60. That's when you become the quote-unquote overnight success.
Right.
After 9 other books. That book just took off, and then since then each book has been
Taken
a
off.
bestseller. Yeah, each book has been as a bestseller. This is my 35th book, believe it or not.
You're
Wow,
unreal.
35.
And when the book really took off, and the other books did okay, but they weren't, knocking the town down. What did you think that this book was better than the others? Was special? What in it sort of made the public say, "Oh my gosh, I can't stop reading this"?
Well, Tell No One number one, had a great hook. Number two, the books before it, as you just mentioned, Myron Bolitar was a sports agent. So people had when you're marketing, people have the idea that, sports book, I have no interest in reading a sports book. But now they've all found and realized they're not sports books at all. But that back then it was a harder marketing tool. But Tell No One had a great hook. When they made the movie in France, the poster read, 8 years ago, Dr. Beck's wife was murdered. Today he got an email from her. So that's a great hook. The idea that this man whose wife was murdered, and then 8 years later he sees her on a webcam alive. That's compelling. It's a lot to say, and you're buying the book. And so I don't know if it's a better book or not, but I think that people were locking into that. No, there was no thing people thinking, it's going to be sports. So all of those things, I think, everything has to work right, and you have to have a lot of luck too. That just happened with Tell No One.
And you have to also understand marketing. But then, as the world kept changing, you ended up signing a deal with Netflix. Now, that doesn't happen often to a lot of writers.
Yeah, I made a couple of shows overseas and that Netflix had picked up on and liked, and we were going to do one show together. And then somebody came up with the idea of, we really want material for our Netflix films in all the countries. They're in 190 countries, and they like to have originals. People who have Netflix know this. They've seen shows Netflix Spain, Netflix Germany, Netflix France. And my books sell actually better overseas than they do here in the U.S., relatively speaking. And so they made an overall deal so that we could do a bunch of different shows in various countries. And it's been really, really fun. And their reach is so vast that it's just been a great experience and a great relationship.
So at this point, Harlan, with the match out, do you feel pressure to come up with another book, or do you have enough on your plate with streaming, with pilots, with television, with everything that you've got going on to just do what you're doing? Or do you want more?
Well, the novels I always consider my day job, right? So every third week in March or so for the last 10 or 15 years, I've released a book then, and I plan on continuing that. So the match, of course, is the new one, and I'm writing. I'm already 150 pages into the next one. It's writing a novel is you're a dictator. It's a completely solitary practice. It's just you. And TV is extraordinarily collaborative. It's the direct opposite creatively. So I've really enjoyed being able to do both. I hope I'm able to continue to do both. But if one has to give, I'll be writing the books. That usually is my priority.
Right. And Wilde, your character, I was sure when I finished him that I was going to meet him again, that there was going to be a series or something, so we know what happened to him.
Right. The Boy from the Woods, which is the first book, if you will, of Wilde. Yeah. I don't tell you how he ended up in the woods. We just know his story that he ended up in the woods. And it's a mystery where he's trying to find a missing teenager, and it really explodes almost all through the world up into presidential politics and everything like that. But I never answer the question at the end of that book of, how did he end up in the woods? So this again is like his origin story. It's like you're reading one of those comic books, and you watch Batman solve crimes, and now you find out Batman's parents were murdered, and that's how he became the Batman. So you can read them in either order. You can read Boy from the Woods first or The Match first. But yeah, this is now you know how he ended up abandoned in the woods and what happened to his parents and his family and all of that.
But of course, now we want to know that we have new information, how this really impacts in the long run his life and his love life, his relationships. But a great job. Now, are your kids involved in writing at all?
I have one of the four. One is involved in writing. One is a very talented TV writer. She's written for me on Stay Close and The Stranger, which people may have seen on Netflix. Most of the funny lines and most of the teenage stories on those two TV shows are hers. She brings a great young voice to the team, which my partner I've been working with in those British series really thought we needed and brought Charlotte in. So Charlotte's a big part of that. She also wrote the pilot episode of a show that I'm hopefully going to be filming in New Jersey. Well, not hopefully, we're going to be filming in New Jersey for Amazon Prime based on my young adult Mickey Bolitar series soon. So yeah, she's quite active. The other ones, no. One is going to be working at NASA in flight control. One is still at Brown University. And one is working in New York for a consulting firm. So they're kind of all over the place.
Right. And the one from Brown, I have two kids who came out of Brown. Very creative, artistic kids. This is what I want to do. I'm going to do it.
She's more science-oriented. I don't even understand. She told me what her major is, something called computational biology. I still don't understand what exactly that is. But, whatever.
No, it's great. And they have a great pre-med, too. So it's all good. Yeah. And you have a discipline. Was that always part of your DNA?
No. In fact, I wouldn't say I'm disciplined about really much else. Just the writing. I have to get it done. And I'm not disciplined in the sense that I go days and days without writing much, and then I'm a streak writer. I think about it. I'm obsessed with it. It's maybe even a little bit of an addiction, and my life's not really in balance if I'm not writing well. But I'm not disciplined in the sense like there's a lot of writers who will say, okay, I get up at 6:30, I'm at my laptop or my computer. I finish at, have lunch at noon. I'm not that kind of disciplined. I'm just one who really wants to do it and get the work done, and I keep changing up how I do it. As long as it helps me produce pages, it's good. If it doesn't help me produce pages, it's bad.
I know. Do you take notes or it's a free form?
I do everything. Again, anything that makes me work. Sometimes I do a lot by hand. I think there's something very freeing and childlike about pen to paper. So I recommend that. And the other thing I like about pen and paper is I'll write by hand 10 pages and then I'll put it on my laptop or word processor or computer, whatever. But that means my first draft is already my second draft. It's making me do one more draft. And there's something also, when you delete on a computer, it's kind of gone from sight. When you cross out on a page, you can kind of still see it. You can draw arrows. So for me, I like doing those first parts and the thinking on paper with a pen.
Yeah, but that makes sense. I do, even for interviews and notes and everything, a yellow pad and a pen. It just feels more intimate. It's something that I can deal with. But do you treat yourself to time off? Like The Match, did you give yourself a break? Because I know you're already started on the next one.
I'm not good with breaks, full breaks, because I don't really consider what I do that hard, that much, not really exhausting or time-consuming work. I'm out of sorts when I'm not writing. So life is about balance, right? So you're balancing with your partner, balancing your relationship with your family, balancing your health, your eating, your exercise, all those things. Friends, if I'm not writing well, the rest of my life kind of gets out of balance. So even on vacation, so-called, I like to wake up and jot some notes or thoughts down. I don't like to let my brain fully off. I think it's why I'm not a stressed kind of person. I get like, but I don't like doing the sort of meditations where they say clear your mind. Nothing stresses me more than telling me to clear my mind. I like my mind sort of actively working and looking for new stories and asking what if and that sort of a thing.
Well, your mind sounds good to me, and I couldn't put down the match, and you won't be able to either. This is Harlan Coben's brand new book. It's in all your bookstores. Continued success. Enjoy the family, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Joan. Appreciate it.
Anytime. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WABC.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II, one that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.